Spider-Man has always been the most popular superhero. Fun and cheeky, he has won people over with his courage and self-deprecating humor, with children as his very first fans. Spider-Man is everywhere, on backpacks, on pajamas, and on all kinds of merchandise. But what makes him strong is what Stan Lee always saw in him.
I think the thing I'm proudest of is the fact that people of all ages seem to love Spider-Man. Any person who reads Spider-Man could imagine that he is Spider-Man.
Because under the mask, Peter Parker is an ordinary man, full of doubts, awkwardness, and struggles. The mask for him is a way to be someone else, to escape his daily life. The dream of every comic book reader became his reality to save those in need, no matter the cost, making him not just a hero for children, but a full-fledged hero. And it's no coincidence that he's still the character who has made the most at the box office, no less than $9 billion from 10 movies. Not to mention the countless animated series and video games based on the franchise. That's why today, I wanted to answer a difficult question. Who is the best Spider-Man on the big screen? Obviously, depending on your generation, the answer might seem obvious, but you'll see that it's not that simple. Because we're not just going to compare their strength, agility, or inventiveness. No, we're going to dive into the heart of each Spidey to understand which one truly represents the essence of Spider-Man and the person behind the mask. So my friends, let's take this time together to determine once and for all who is the best Spider-Man. You're with Kevin Buchart, your favorite Spider's favorite theorist. Intro. Tobey the Warrior. How else could we start this video than with the one who started it all? Not just Spider-Man, but the entire superhero genre in cinema. Because before Sam Raimi's trilogy, there were already Marvel movies in theaters, but they were often looked down upon. Stuff for kids, or worse, for nerds. You know, those people who smell bad and spend their lives in comic book stores. Sloppy movies with lazy plots and special effects worthy of the best B-movies. But Sony wants to break the cycle, to make a real movie. A truly great movie, with Spider-Man. The project was first developed by James Cameron, before he gave way to a director known for his horror films, Sam Raimi. And with Tobey Maguire, Raimi chose a Peter Parker with an ordinary face, an everyman. No, his hero isn't a superstar, he's actually the complete opposite.
Tell him to stop, please!
Like his favorite character, Ash in Evil Dead, Peter is just an ordinary guy on whom the weight of the universe comes crashing down. He has powers, sure, but with them, he loses everything. His job, his apartment, the girl he loves. At the beginning of his story, he thinks his life will get better thanks to his powers. And he quickly realizes the opposite, that they are actually a curse. Because as soon as he uses them for himself, out of selfishness, the axe falls. His Uncle Ben dies because he failed to do what he should have. Then comes the legendary phrase that will haunt him for life.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
And that's the essence of Tobey's Peter. A resilient man on whom everything comes crashing down, but who holds on. Nothing works out for him. It's almost too much. And we feel that weight even in his Spider-Man. Because no, this Peter is not a genius. He's more of a natural-born fighter. He never had to tinker with any gadgets. First, because he doesn't have the time. He already spends his days just surviving and balancing two lives. But above all, because his mutation gave him everything from the start. The strength, the agility, the spider sense. And the organic web. His style is heavy, realistic. No, he doesn't swing with the fluidity of the others, but he can take a hit, and above all, he hits hard. He's probably the one who can take the most hits. Tobey isn't the greatest strategist nor the greatest scientist, but he's the most instinctive. His intelligence is situational. He always finds a way to defeat his enemy, and his body almost acts on its own. He dodges, he boxes. It's simple, he takes it all. His life, his love life, his bosses, his landlords, and even the press.
Spider-Man, hero, or menace? Menace. He was guarding that armor. Don't worry, Annika. You get the photos, I'll handle the headlines, okay? All right? Okay with you? Yes, sir.
Tobey is in constant pain. And it's precisely this pain that gives him unbreakable resilience. So he's not afraid to take the hits to push past his limits. Like when he stopped a speeding subway train with just his arms, or when the Green Goblin made him choose who to save.
Let the woman you love die, or suffer the little.
Children. Tobey never chooses, he sacrifices himself for others, always, and that's exactly what brings him closer to the Peter from the comics. Tired, exhausted, he never gives up, because he knows it. If he doesn't do it, then who will? With great power comes great responsibility. He is haunted by this phrase, almost condemned by it. But the greatest strength of this Peter is his universe. In Raimi's films, New York isn't just a backdrop, it's a character. And Spidey is its favorite, its protector.
He seems to have come out of nowhere to answer the prayers of the city, just when all hope seemed to be lost.
No matter his secret identity, New Yorkers will always return the favor. We found something, but we won't tell anyone.
It's perfectly fine. We found something.
We won't tell anybody.
Because he's one of theirs, in a universe true to the comics. With the advantage of being the first. The one who can pull Spider-Man's most iconic villains straight from the comic book pages. Like many mythical heroes, it's often the villains that make the character popular. From the very first movie, Peter flirts with MJ, becomes friends with Harry, and faces his father, the Green Goblin. A goblin masterfully portrayed by Willem Dafoe, who, in just one film, became the very first true great villain of the superhero era. The most iconic Marvel villain in cinema. I could squash you like a bug right now.
I could squash you like a bug right now.
Terrifying, cruel, consumed by his own powers, the perfect nemesis. Where Spider-Man allows Peter to escape a miserable life and become greater than himself, the Goblin lets a billionaire sink into chaos until his last breath. The perfect mirror. And that's where everything falls apart for Peter. He realizes that his two lives are about to collide, and that's the whole point of the second movie. Spidey steps back to give Peter a chance to exist, but New York needs him. Because once again, it's one of his loved ones who threatens the city. Once again, his responsibilities force him to put on the suit. Octavius, his mentor, goes insane. He becomes Dr. Octopus and threatens to engulf the entire city. The power of the sun in the palm of my hand. But this time, thanks to Peter, I'll do it. He regains consciousness just in time to sacrifice himself. Two threats and the same pattern. It's Spider-Man who's attacked, but it's Peter who resolves the conflict, because one constant remains throughout the entire trilogy. The villains are always people close to Peter, but it's also his loved ones who pay the price. Riding on the success of the first two, the third Spider-Man came quickly. A real feat of special effects, yet it was much less appealing. Too many storylines, mediocre villains, and a Peter we no longer recognize. With the symbiote, Peter is just a caricature of himself. He wants his revenge, and that's exactly what will help his enemies thrive. This time, they're not facing just one villain, but three. Sandman, who is very faithful to the comics. The second Goblin, his friend Harry. And finally, a kind of venom born from the one whose career he ruined, Eddie Brock.
Where am I?
So yes, the black suit is really cool. But this Peter has lost the reason why we believed in him. He becomes almost as unbearable as Mary Jane. Because let's be honest, if Raimi's trilogy moves us, it's never because of love, but because of the burden. Everything related to sacrifice, to the weight, to Peter's loneliness is a complete success. We suffer with him, we carry his cross with him. It's even become what Tobey's fans come looking for in every Spider-Man movie since. The Peter who takes the hits, who holds on, and who steps aside for others. But as soon as it comes to love, nothing works anymore. The love stories are chaotic. The relationship with MJ never really feels convincing. And we know it, the two actors can't stand each other on set. Clearly you can feel it on screen. But above all, Mary Jane is only there to be the princess who needs saving. She screams half the time, has almost no personality, and only serves to make Peter even more miserable. Even Gwen is just a foil, there to make Mary Jane jealous and turn our everyman into a pseudo-macho toxic misogynist. So yes, we love to see this Peter suffer. But we never really see him live, love, or be happy, not even for a moment. Raimi made us feel the full weight of Spider-Man. But he never made us feel the joy of Peter Parker, and that's exactly where Andrew excels. Andrew, the romantic. While a Spider-Man 4 was planned with Sam Raimi, Sony realized after the third film that the formula was no longer working. So they decided to reboot everything, to change it all by bringing in Mark Webb, a young director who had only made one feature film at that time. 500 Days of Summer with Zooey Deschanel and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. A touching love story, the kind of film that brings a tear to your eye. And that's exactly what Sony is looking for, because in 2012, Marvel is making a big impact. Phase 1 of the MCU is coming to an end with Avengers. But above all, each member of the team is deeply human. The audience connects as much with their flaws as with their courage. They're not just heroes who sacrifice themselves, they have doubts, they love, they argue. The chemistry is perfect. And that's where the MCU changes the genre forever. Sony then looks for the perfect Spider-Man actor, a Spider-Man we can really connect with, not just a hero who has all the world's miseries fall on him. That's how they unveil a young actor sitting in the audience at Comic-Con. an actor who has always dreamed of playing Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield.
So, thanks for having me. You have no idea how much this means to me. I needed Spidey in my life when I was a kid, and he gave me hope in every comic I read. This is the coolest moment of my life.
Tobey was made famous by Peter Parker, but he always kept a certain distance from his involvement. For him, it was just a role, nothing more. Andrew, on the other hand, is Peter. Or at least, he has always deeply identified with him. The only thing left is to convince the audience. And from the very first scenes of the trailer, we understand that Sony is aiming for something bigger and more spectacular. A direction less distinctive than Raimi's, but a bolder one. His Spider-Man is agile. He swings like we've never seen before. He almost flies. Unlike Tobey, he takes very few hits. He dodges, he seems much more vulnerable, both physically and emotionally, but also much more strategic. Just like with Tobey, a mistake will cost his Uncle Ben his life, and it will make him spiral. Except this time, he won't be alone. Because what gives Andrew all his strength is his relationship with Gwen. Because if Andrew is so good as Peter, it's because Emma Stone is just as good. Their relationship shines. We believe in it. We're even immersed in it.
Between Andrew and me, this relationship wouldn't exist in a world without superheroes.
And for good reason, the two actors fall in love during filming, and their story comes out in the open. The looks, the caresses, the arguments, everything seems real. For once, Peter makes us feel like he's alive, in love, and not defined solely by Spider-Man. And in The Amazing Spider-Man, Parker is just as important as his alter ego. Here, there's no organic webbing. His powers have certainly given him the attributes of a spider: strength, agility, endurance, and a sharp spider sense that seems to slow down time, as shown in the Times Square scene. But otherwise, Peter has to create everything himself. And it's the first time we really discover the nerdy side of the character. Except here, there are no stock gadgets. There isn't even a universe packed with futuristic technology. Peter must invent everything using only what's available, which is one of his strengths. And combined with his spider senses, it's often used very well, like in this scene in the sewers. But it's also one of his weaknesses. The homemade equipment constantly needs to be improved. As ingenious as it is, it's never reliable, and it often ends up turning against him. Yes, here, Peter is a nerd, a scientist well above average. But unlike Tobey, he's not portrayed as a loser who just takes it. And actually, in the comics, it's the same. He's a nerd, sure, but at a time when that's no longer an insult. He's no longer withdrawn into himself. On the contrary, he takes care of others. He enjoys life, cracks jokes, flirts. Peter becomes cool. And his Spider-Man is even cooler. He's not just there to throw punches anymore. He genuinely enjoys being Spider-Man fighting crime.
Dude, that isn't funny. It is.
Spidey finally cracks jokes. He teases his opponents.
He's going for it. It's a real knife. Yes, it's a real knife. My weakness is little knives. Leave me alone. Everything is a knife. It's so simple.
But then, in that case, why were the critics so harsh with these films when they came out? Well, because Mark Webb captured the character's essence and created legendary scenes that really moved us. Like this first-person shot, he overlooked something else that's fundamental in the comics. A good hero is also defined by his villains. Of course, he comes right after Raimi, who already used up the best villains. The Goblin, Octopus, Venom, but there were still plenty left. And actually, the problem isn't so much the choice of villains as it is the way they impact the story. At no point does the Lizard really worry us. His quest is vague and not very believable. And what about the second movie? Probably the worst of them all, with an Electro who is completely ridiculous and a Goblin who is just a pale copy of the original. A movie that buried Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, and yet it might contain the most beautiful scene out of all 10 movies combined. Because even if everyone has forgotten the Green Goblin and his motivations, no one will ever forget Gwen's death. Mark Webb did his job well. We fell in love with this couple, and he chose to break our hearts. Let's just say it was incredibly powerful. This scene will stay with us forever. But it also sounded the death knell for the Amazing Spider-Man adventure, slammed by critics and labeled as the worst Spider-Man in cinema. But was it really? Because in the end, everything was there. The style, the humor, the emotion. Even that not-so-great costume in the very first movie became, in the second one, maybe the most beautiful design of the time. I liked Andrew Garfield, and yes, I still miss him. And if people still ask for him today, it's not for his fights or villains, we just said that. It's because of what he gives off. Andrew is the Spider-Man who loves, the only one whose heart we really saw beating. Where Tobey carried the world on his shoulders to save it, Andrew couldn't save the one person he was supposed to. And that's exactly why his fall hurts so much. We don't cry for a hero who fails, we cry for a boy who loses the one he loves. That's his essence. Tobey is the warrior who endures and perseveres. Andrew is the lover, the one who feels everything, too strongly to the point of breaking. He even says it in No Way Home. That event destroys him.
I lost Gwen. I couldn't save her. I'm never going to be able to forgive myself for that, but I carried on, tried to keep going. At some point, I just stopped pulling my punches. I got rageful.
A metaphor for the end of his vigilante run, which he learned about through the press. The actor, like his Peter, never truly recovered from the break.
It's an incredible character that I've played since I was 3 years old. He's compromised and it breaks my heart.
Two sides of Parker, two halves of the character. But one is missing, the child side. The one who laughs, who is amazed, who hasn't yet understood the price to pay. And that part, Tom Holland was going to give us. Tom the child. In 2016, an opportunity opened up for Sony and Marvel. Yes, the MCU was in full swing, but it was still missing its biggest names. Because in the 90s, on the verge of bankruptcy, Marvel had sold off the rights to its most popular characters, Spider-Man to Sony, the X-Men, and the Fantastic Four to Fox. As a result, how could anyone imagine a complete Marvel Cinematic Universe without Spider-Man, without its mutants, and without its first family? So Marvel did what it had to do to expand its universe even further, and offered Sony the chance to bring Spider-Man into it. But once again, with a new actor, the opportunity was too good to pass up. Sony agreed, much to the dismay of Andrew Garfield, and it's Tom Holland who becomes the new face of Peter Parker in Civil War, directed by the Russo brothers. Hey everyone, yes here, there's no origin story. So, no Ben dying, Peter is directly welcomed by Tony Stark, and as a symbol, we meet him at the same time the Avengers do. In a fight that instantly shows us his potential, in the middle of a world full of heroes. In just a few seconds, Tony shows us how clever this kid is, then how strong he is. Stark directly calls on him to neutralize Captain, and Peter stops Bucky's arm without any problem.
You have a metal arm? That is awesome!
Above all, the Russos faced the tough job of placing this new character within the MCU, as they mentioned in an interview. Unlike his predecessors, this 15-year-old teenager is not responsible for his uncle's death, and that's absolutely going to change his whole approach. Tom doesn't begin his portrayal with that underlying guilt that defined Tobey and Andrew. He's just a teenager in a world that's bigger than him. A world where he is already among the most physically powerful, marveling at it like a kid in an amusement park. Was awesome! And that's the big difference. Tobey carried a burden. Andrew carried grief. Tom, on the other hand, isn't carrying anything yet. He plays, he discovers, he marvels.
Oh my god, insane, insane. Look at this thing, insane. Look at this thing.
He's like a kid let loose in the big leagues, and that's exactly what makes him unique. Instantly, he's introduced as a combination of the first two, human, geeky, funny, and powerful. But among the Civil War heroes, he's also presented as a miniature Stark. We'll have to wait for his first solo movie to learn more about him, about Peter Parker. And that's where the problem lies. Clearly, Tom Holland had everything it took to become the best Spider-Man right from the start. But John Watts decided to change everything. There was no question of doing again what Sam Raimi and Mark Webb had already shown. This Peter would move as far away as possible from the one we knew to draw inspiration from his Ultimate version.
Ultimate Spider-Man is the closest to what John has created. I think that version of Peter Parker in that story arc is very similar.
So, Oscorp, Mary Jane is gone, replaced by Michelle Jones, and New York is done. Yes, the city still exists in the background, but it's no longer predominant at all. The director, completely inexperienced with big projects, decides to move away from what defines the character, and offers a teenage version under the mentorship of Tony Stark.
Don't do anything I would do, and definitely don't do anything I wouldn't do.
And yet, Tom Holland surprises. He brings real freshness to the character. He is powerful, as shown in the Fury scene, agile, and he uses Stark technology with remarkable efficiency. His spider sense, on the other hand, is more subtle, more instinctive. It doesn't just allow him to sense a physical threat. Like with the drone or Mysterio, it lets him feel when danger is approaching, like in Happy's apartment, where he literally senses the arrival of the Goblin. But above all, he is extremely resilient. We see this especially against the infamous Goblin, or even with Mysterio when he gets hit by a train right in the face. But what really sets him apart is that he's a genius. Where Tobey had situational intelligence and Andrew solved his problems through science, Tom is immersed in technology that he handles with astonishing ease. And not only that, because he can also diffuse any situation with an ability to think very quickly under pressure using pop culture references like Ant-Man with Return of the Jedi.
Hey guys, have you ever seen that really old movie, Empire Strikes Back?
Or Ebony Maw with Alien?
Have you ever seen the old movie Aliens?
As he says, two very old movies. A real modern geek at heart, all with a lot of nonchalance, wonder and naivety, which makes him incredibly endearing. Well, all of this is very positive. But does that make him the best Spider-Man though? Well, not necessarily, because his strengths are also his weaknesses. The two previous Spider-Men lived in a world where they were the only heroes able to make a difference, but also the center of their own conflicts, since very often their villains were born as a result of Spider-Man's very existence. Here, Peter is thrown into a much larger universe where the threats are countless, yet Peter is probably one of the most well-balanced heroes when it comes to facing more grounded, street-level threats, which has been rare in the MCU until now, and it's a balance that has been extremely difficult to achieve. Sure, the Vulture and Mysterio aren't bad villains, but at no point do we feel a real challenge that pushes Peter to surpass himself. And that's not all. When adapting a character, staying true to the lore is essential for fans. And here, almost nothing matches what makes Peter Parker a true Spider-Man, even having him fight a supposed multiversal monster in his second movie across Europe, without even his costume. So the question is, why distort him this much? Because in the end, it's when he's surrounded by Avengers or other characters that he's the most authentic. In my opinion, Jon Watts never found the right tone, the right balance for his character. His best roles and strongest presence are with the Russo brothers, who really got him and know how to use his youth, vulnerability, and strength.
You're an Avenger now.
And that's where, for me, the biggest criticism of this Spider-Man lies. He never stands on his own. Just look at his third movie. To work, No Way Home needed to bring back the old Spider-Man, but not only that, also the old villains from the previous two franchises. A marketing stroke of genius for sure. An emotional bomb, no one can deny that. Let's go.
Let's go!
You
But let's admit it, it's also an admission of failure. Tom alone, with his own universe, wasn't enough to meet the audience's expectations. And it's no coincidence, it's almost a curse. Sony keeps losing its way with its Spideys. Raimi's Spider-Man 3 was already collapsing under the weight of 3 villains. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 fell apart under the same excess. And No Way Home, as great as it is, only stands by bringing together everything that came before it. But above all, it says something profound about this Peter. From the very beginning, he has needed a mentor. Tony, then Happy and Fury, and finally Strange. There's always a bigger figure to guide him, protect him, save him. And that's probably the most persistent criticism aimed at this Spider-Man. He never really stood on his own. Even his relationship with his friends stays very superficial, very adolescent. The duo with Ned is nice, the guy in the chair, but it doesn't really develop that much. And his love story with MJ only really takes off when it ends. As for leaving New York, it doesn't just hurt the character, it hurts the direction itself. Because Spider-Man needs skyscrapers to exist, it's part of the package. But Watts insists on only filming him in residential neighborhoods. You have to wait until the very last scene of the third movie to finally see Spider-Man swinging in Manhattan. It's completely crazy, and in the end, it all comes together. The constant mentor, the carefreeness, the suburban setting, the stakes never too heavy. Watts didn't make Tom a hero, he made him a child who is protected, guided, carried along, someone who is prevented from growing up.
The training wheels protocol. Come on, man. I don't need training wheels. I'm being trained like a kid all the time. It's not cool.
Where Tobey already carried all the weariness of the world on his shoulders and Andrew bore the weight of grief, Tom was never allowed to become an adult. But that's just it. A child always ends up growing up. And Tom has everything it takes to finally become the fans' favorite Spider. He knows it. That's why, even if you've decided, the future could still change, especially for the Spiders. Well, I'm very critical of No Way Home because it shows all the flaws in Sony's management, but it also brought our 3 Spider-Men together. And I have to say, for fans like us, it was a real treat. Because fundamentally, Watts did one thing. He took the best from all 3 Peters and fixed what didn't work for each. Tobey returns as an experienced, seasoned Spider-Man. Still just as tired, but now as a guide, the trio's big brother. Andrew, meanwhile, looks like he's returning from hell. Yet it's his experience, his grief, that lets him guide Tom through his own grief. He's the Peter who's the most amazed by this meeting. I love you guys. Still just as human, just as energetic, and the movie even gives him a redemption that brings a tear to my eye every time I rewatch it. When he catches MJ where he had let Gwen fall. Are you okay? Clearly, we want to see more, and Tom finally leaves childhood behind. No more actions without consequences. This time he truly learns that with great power comes great responsibility.
You have power, and with great power, there must also come great responsibility.
But he loses everything. Like a reset for a character who, in the end, had barely evolved over 3 movies. The whole world forgets him. He finds himself alone, without a mentor, without Stark, without Happy, without anyone. For the first time, the kid is truly on his own. And that's exactly why I'm looking forward to Brand New Day so much. We've already made a lot of videos on the subject, so I won't go into detail. In this installment, Peter should finally outgrow adolescence and truly become the Spider-Man we've all been waiting for. And he has absolutely everything he needs to succeed. The difference is, John Watts has made way for Destin Daniel Cretton, the director of Shang-Chi, and Tom Holland has become an executive producer. He said it several times, he scoured the web to understand what the fans really wanted, and that's probably what's going to change everything, because Tom, like Andrew, is in love with the character. But he doesn't settle for just the emotions that Peter made him feel as a child. No, he wants to help him grow, to give him everything he never had. And his partnership with Destin Daniel Cretton is probably the best thing that could have happened to Spidey, because Cretton is a die-hard fan of the character, of his comic book version. He's going to bring to this new era exactly what every Spider-Man fan feels when they open one of his comics, and Tom will embody him with all the love he has for the character.
It felt like a fresh challenge, something audiences haven't seen before, and I hope they enjoy it as much as we did making it.
Personally, I'm hopeful about the future. However, I don't think the 2 former actors are done yet, since Tobey Maguire is expected in Doomsday and Secret Wars. And the Russos know exactly what he represents, the warrior. That's why, according to rumors, Tobey will defend his universe from destruction right at the beginning of the next Avengers. In a legendary fight against Wolverine, a fight where this Spidey will give him a real run for his money before finally falling. Yes, this Tobey embodies the fight. And who better than Wolverine as an opponent? But that's not all. He should also make his return in Secret Wars, and maybe even alongside Wolverine and Iron Man. Yes, you heard right, all of this is just a rumor. But Hugh Jackman reportedly agreed to return on one condition: to share the screen with the 2 other legends of the Marvel Universe. And what about Andrew Garfield? Well, he will probably be back in Secret Wars too. We still don't know his role in this story, but I have a feeling he would be one of Doom's barons. You know, one of those who rule a region of Battleworld, in this case, Spider Island. Imagine we would get to see him during the worst period of his life, his period of grief when he turned to violence, maybe even in a black suit to face Tobey and Tom. That would be crazy. The next few years will be wild for our Spideys, and Tom might show he has what it takes to be Spider-Man. But before we answer this question for good, it seems like we've forgotten someone. The Spider-Man who isn't a Parker. Miles Morales, the Challenger. We've often discussed our 3 live-action Spider-Men. But we can't leave out a Spider-Man who's gotten a lot of people talking in recent years.
Okay, let's do this one last time. Yeah, my name is Miles Morales, and for like 2 days, I've been the one and only Spider-Man.
Miles made his very first appearance in 2011, created by Bendis. The inspiration? Donald Glover, who we saw show up in Spider-Man pajamas in an episode of Community, a nod to his own campaign to play Spider-Man on screen. This image made an impression on Bendis, to the point of inspiring him to create a whole new Spider-Man, and it changed the character's story forever. After the Peter Parker of the Ultimate Universe dies at the hands of the Green Goblin, Miles, a young mixed-race boy bitten by a radioactive spider, becomes the new Spider-Man of that universe. But Miles isn't Peter. Forget the science nerd. Miles loves hip-hop and graffiti. He's an artist. In short, a cool kid with way more swagger than his mentor. Where Peter is overwhelmed by the weight of his responsibilities, Miles is just trying to do the right thing through a teenager's eyes. He doesn't see life in black and white, hasn't experienced what Peter has, and comes from a different background. Unlike him, Miles isn't an orphan, and his family plays an absolutely central role in keeping him grounded. In fact, the reason he has his mother's last name, Morales, and not his father's, is no coincidence. It's his way of turning away from the Davis family's criminal past, both his father's, who eventually left it behind, and his uncle Aaron's. By the way, this uncle has a huge influence on him. He's the source of his entire worldview. That's because Aaron is the prowler, a criminal, but also a loving uncle. It's proof once again that life is never just black or white. Miles is able to see the best in everyone, and he never hesitates to step in when he thinks it's right, even when facing other spiders, much more experienced than him. And it was through his animated movies that Miles became extremely popular. Like, what's up, Danger?
Like, what's up, Danger?
In addition to totally revolutionizing the world of animation, the Spider-Verse made him a fan favorite in a completely wild, multiversal adventure. Not to mention the Insomniac game that allowed us to play as him in his eponymous game. And that's when we realized that Miles isn't just another Spider-Man. Yes, Peter is clearly one of the most impressive and exciting characters in the Marvel Universe, but Bendis gave Miles powers that, on paper, make him infinitely more dangerous. He's simply able to turn invisible and unleash electric venom blasts that could knock out any enemy, including Rhino or even Spider-Man himself. Finally, he also gets his own touching story, his relationship with a Gwen who came from another universe. Once again, it's absolutely brilliant. Ghost Spider is, just like Andrew's Gwen, an essential part of what makes us love Miles. She makes him endearing, vulnerable, almost defenseless. But above all, she has something the other love interests don't have, a crazy aura. In short, I'll tell you, I find almost no flaws in Miles from the Spider-Verse, but for me, he's kind of in a category of his own, and I'll wait for his introduction in the MCU to really judge him like the others. Well, I think we've covered everything. All the pros and cons of our favorite Spider-Man, and I have to admit, despite all these flaws, personally, Andrew is still, in my eyes, the best Spider-Man. But I feel like Tom has all the potential to dethrone him. So what about you? Tell me in the comments which one convinces you the most. And above all, give me your reasons. In the meantime, I'm sharing my latest analysis on the upcoming Brand New Day and the villain no one saw coming. See you next Sunday at 6:30 p.m. for a new video. Remember, staying curious is the secret to happiness. Ciao.